Have you ever been ignored by a man who acted like you barely existed, only to notice him circling back the moment you stopped caring? What if I told you that the very moment he dismissed you was the moment he unknowingly set himself up to chase you later? Because here's the truth. No one tells you. Men don't regret losing access to you when you're around. They regret it when your absence hits harder than they expected. And that's exactly what we're breaking down today. Before we go deeper, I want you to imagine this. He thought ignoring you gave him the upper hand. He believed you'd wait. He assumed you'd keep showing up, keep proving yourself, keep trying to decode his mixed signals. But something unexpected happened. You stopped chasing. You stopped trying. You shifted your energy, and suddenly his silence wasn't a strategy. It was a mistake. Because when a woman withdraws her emotional presence, a man feels the loss in ways he never anticipated. Your absence becomes louder than your attention. Your silence becomes more powerful than your words. Your confidence becomes a reminder of what he misjudged. In this video, we're going to uncover why men often return, sometimes months later, confused, curious, and unexpectedly drawn back to the woman they once ignored. We'll break down the psychology of avoidance, the emotional triggers that wake him up, and the surprising moment he realizes he read you wrong. And by the end of this video, you're not just going to understand why he comes back. You're going to understand your own power. So if you've ever wondered why a man who overlooked you ends up chasing you later, stay with me. Because the answer is deeper, sharper, and more empowering than you think. When a man pulls away or seems to ignore you, it's easy to assume he's lost interest, grown bored, or simply doesn't care. But the truth is far more layered, and often completely unrelated to your worth. Male avoidance is rooted in a complex blend of emotional wiring, instinct, timing, and subconscious defense mechanisms that many men don't even realize they're using. For some men, avoidance is a way to maintain control. Getting close to someone emotionally can trigger a sense of vulnerability they were never taught to handle. Society often raises men to stay composed, detached, and strong. So when they feel something intense, especially attraction, they may distance themselves because they don't know how to navigate those feelings without losing their sense of independence. Avoidance becomes a shield, not a rejection. For others, ignoring you is a test they don't admit to giving. They want to see if you'll chase, if you'll make the effort they're too afraid to initiate, or if you'll validate their value without them needing to risk emotional exposure. It's not mature, but it's real. And it happens far more often than women realize. There's also the fear of misjudgment. What if she's not as interested as I am? What if I look desperate? What if I lose control of the situation? Avoidance becomes a safety mechanism against potential embarrassment or rejection. Instead of risking the emotional hit, he steps back and pretends not to care. Some men ignore because they're overwhelmed by timing, stress, work, or personal issues. Not because you're unimportant, but because they compartmentalize. If connection threatens the mental box they're in, they disconnect until they feel steady again. And then there's the most ironic part. Many men ignore the women who matter most to them, because those are the ones who trigger deep emotional responses. Strong feelings shake their inner balance. Instead of stepping forward, they retreat, thinking distance will help them regain clarity. Instead, it often backfires. The space they created becomes a mirror that exposes what they actually feel. What's crucial to understand is this. Avoidance isn't always about you. More often than not, it's a reflection of his internal conflicts, not your value. And when he pulls away, he's not just avoiding you, he's avoiding the emotional intensity you unknowingly awakened in him. There comes a moment, often quietly, unexpectedly, when a man who once ignored you begins to feel a shift he can't explain. Something inside him wakes up, and suddenly he's paying attention in ways he didn't before. This shift isn't random. It's triggered by emotional cues that hit deeper than logic, deeper than pride, and far deeper than he expects. One of the strongest triggers is the loss of certainty. When he no longer feels sure that you're available, interested, or waiting, it sends a ripple through his confidence. Men may not always show it, but they rely heavily on the comfort of knowing you're there. When that comfort disappears, it creates emotional tension that draws him back toward you. It's not the fear of losing you as a person. It's the fear of losing the emotional safety he once took for granted. Another powerful trigger is your shift in energy. A woman who's no longer focused on him becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to be, but because her attention is no longer feeding his ego. This sudden change forces him to see you differently. You're no longer the predictable source of validation. You become your own world again. And men notice that deeply. Then there's the trigger of comparison. When he sees you thriving, smiling, or simply living without seeking his presence, it activates a quiet fear. Someone else could want her. Someone else could appreciate what I overlooked. The idea of another man stepping into the space he abandoned can push him into chase mode faster than any confrontation ever could. Another emotional switch is your calmness. Not anger, not begging, not proving anything, just calm self-possession. When you aren't reacting or fighting for his attention, it signals emotional strength, something men instinctively respect and respond to. Your peace becomes more attractive than any pressure could ever be. And the deepest trigger of all is realizing your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. It's the quiet moments when he notices your name missing from his notifications, when he reaches for his phone out of habit, when he wonders what you're doing, who you're with, and why he suddenly cares so much. These emotional triggers don't manipulate him. They reveal the part of him he tried to avoid, and once they activate, the chase often becomes inevitable. Distance changes everything. Not because you're playing a game, not because you're trying to manipulate him, but because it creates a different emotional landscape that he can't ignore. When you pull back, even slightly, the entire dynamic between you and him begins to rearrange itself. Many men don't realize the power they lose until space makes them confront feelings they've been avoiding. At first, the distance feels like relief to him. He tells himself he has time, control, and emotional freedom. But gradually, that space stops feeling like space and starts feeling like absence. The absence of your energy, your voice, your presence. An absence carries a weight that attention never could. He begins to sense the gap you once filled without even trying. The truth is, most men assume they have a silent hold on the women they've connected with, especially the ones who showed interest. When you withdraw your focus, that assumption collapses. It forces him to see that your attention wasn't permanent. It wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't something he could treat carelessly and still expect to receive. Distance takes the power from his hands and places it in yours, not through force but through clarity. Your absence creates contrast. It highlights the difference between how things felt when you were investing in him and how they feel now that you're not. That contrast triggers awareness. Awareness turns into reflection. Reflection turns into curiosity. And curiosity is the first step toward him coming forward. Distance also dissolves illusions. When you stop giving him immediate responses, instant comfort, or emotional reinforcement, it shows him exactly where he stands in your life. It reveals whether he was a priority, an option, or simply someone you cared about until you outgrew the connection. Men feel that shift more deeply than they admit. Distance removes the fantasy he built in his head about you being easily accessible, always willing, always waiting. And then comes the unexpected part, the shift in how he perceives your value. When a woman is emotionally available, men often don't see the full depth of her worth, but when she steps back, her value expands in his mind. It creates a kind of emotional scarcity, not because you're unavailable, but because you're no longer overflowing energy into a space that wasn't appreciating it. Scarcity makes him pay attention. It makes him reassess. It makes him remember things he thought he forgot. Most importantly, distance doesn't just shift the power, it reveals it. It shows who actually has emotional stability. It shows who is capable of walking away. It shows who is growing and who is standing still. And when he realizes you're not anchored to him, not waiting for him, not orbiting around him, that's when the power dynamic flips. Suddenly he feels the need to move toward you because your emotional independence exposes the truth he didn't want to face. You were never his to ignore, and now you're the one choosing how the story continues. There comes a moment, often subtle, often unexpected, when a man who once overlooked you begins to see you with new eyes. It rarely happens all at once. It unfolds quietly, like a light slowly turning on in a room he never realized was dark. And what triggers this shift is not your effort, not your pursuit, not your attempts to prove yourself. It's the space you created, and the self-respect you stepped into. The very first sign he notices your value is when your absence disrupts a pattern he didn't even know existed. He was used to your presence, your attention, your willingness to engage. It felt familiar, almost guaranteed. But when that familiarity disappears, he begins to recognize the emotional support you were providing. He realizes there was a softness, a warmth, a consistency in you that he underestimated, and the lack of it feels uncomfortable. As time passes, he starts remembering the little things, the way you listened without judgment, the ease of your conversations, the kindness you offered without being asked, the comfort he felt around you without realizing you were the source of it. These memories don't rush in. They drip in slowly, often when he's alone, bored, or emotionally unguarded. And with each memory, the image of you grows sharper, more meaningful, more valuable. Another moment of realization hits when he compares you to others, even unintentionally. He meets people who don't communicate like you did, who don't bring the same peace, who don't carry the same energy. Suddenly, your qualities stand out. You become the benchmark, and he begins to understand that what he dismissed was actually rare. There is also a moment when he notices your growth. Maybe he sees you smiling, posting confidently, improving your life, or simply existing without needing him in your world. That independence ignites something in him. Not jealousy exactly, but awareness. He starts to see your strength, not as a challenge, but as something deeply attractive. Your ability to move forward, to heal, to rise, becomes undeniable proof that you were always more than he gave you credit for. And then there's the emotional shift he can't hide from. He starts to feel a sense of discomfort, not panic, but a quiet realization that he misjudged you, that he assumed you would always be there, that he confused your gentleness for availability, your interest for dependency, your openness for permanence. And now he sees how wrong that was. This is the stage where he begins to think, did I misread her? Did I take her for granted? Why do I care now? Those questions don't leave him easily. They follow him, they linger, and they create a pull toward you, even if he doesn't act on it immediately. When a man starts noticing your value, it's rarely because you changed for him. It's because you changed for yourself. And in doing so, you revealed the depth, confidence, and emotional richness he wasn't ready to see before. Now he finally does. One of the most powerful forces in human connection isn't what we say, it's what we communicate without words. When you step back, when you reclaim your focus, when you stop chasing, you begin sending signals that speak directly to his subconscious. You may not realize you're sending them, but he feels them, and these silent signals often become the magnetic pull that draws him back toward you. The first silent signal is your shift in emotional availability. Not coldness, not bitterness, just neutrality. When your energy no longer leans toward him, he senses it, even from a distance. Your calm, detached presence replaces the eagerness he once felt from you. That shift creates curiosity. Curiosity creates tension, and tension is what pulls him in. Suddenly, he finds himself paying attention, wondering what changed inside you. Another powerful silent signal is your confidence returning home to you. You move differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with a quiet certainty that wasn't there before. He may not know what caused it, but he feels the difference. Confidence isn't loud, it's steady. And that steadiness often makes him question whether he underestimated you, or worse, lost a version of you he didn't appreciate enough. Then there's the signal of your unavailability. Not playing hard to get, but genuinely being busy with your own life. When you stop responding instantly, when you're no longer the first to initiate, when you don't adjust your schedule around him, it sends a message. You're not orbiting him anymore. You have your own world. And men are instinctively drawn to women who have their own world, because it makes them want to earn a place in it. Another silent pull comes from your emotional steadiness. When you don't react with frustration, questioning, or neediness, he senses a level of inner strength he didn't expect. Silence from a woman who used to be expressive can be unsettling for a man. It makes him wonder what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and whether he still holds the same position in your life. That uncertainty nudges him closer, hoping to regain his footing. There's also the subtle shift in how you respond to his presence. Short, calm responses, a lack of emotional pressure, a sense of self-contained peace. These signals tell him, I'm not chasing you, and I don't need you to validate me. That independence is magnetic. It shows you're no longer emotionally tied to his inconsistency, and that realization hits him harder than any confrontation ever could. But the strongest silent signal of all is your happiness without him. When he sees you smiling, glowing, growing, and genuinely thriving, it triggers a deep internal response. Men don't chase sadness, they chase strength, light, and stability. Your joy becomes a reminder of the woman he once overlooked, and that reminder becomes a pull he struggles to ignore. These signals aren't strategies, they're natural outcomes of choosing yourself. And once you do, he feels the shift in ways he can't explain, and often can't resist. When a man pulls away, it often feels final. It feels like he's made up his mind, chosen distance, and walked out of your emotional orbit for good. But the truth is, many men come back, and not because you chased, begged, or tried to prove your worth. They return because distance forces them to confront realities they were avoiding, feelings they underestimated, and the emotional consequences of their own choices. One of the biggest reasons men return is the emotional rebound effect. When he steps away, he expects relief, freedom, or clarity. Instead, he's met with silence. Your silence. Without your presence, he loses the emotional support, attention, and sense of importance he quietly relied on. At first, he might not notice it, but as time goes on, that void starts to feel uncomfortable. He realizes he lost a source of comfort he never acknowledged. Another reason is curiosity mixed with nostalgia. He starts remembering the warmth you gave him, the ease of talking to you, the subtle connection he dismissed, or the version of himself he liked better when he was around you. These memories don't disappear. They surface when life becomes quiet, stressful, or emotionally empty. And nostalgia is powerful. It pulls him toward what felt familiar and meaningful. Men also return because their emotional pace is different from women's. Women often process feelings in the moment. Men often process them in hindsight. When things get intense, he may retreat to protect his ego, his clarity, or his sense of control. But once the emotional fog clears, he sees the situation through a different lens and realizes he walked away from something valuable. It's only then that the desire to reconnect awakens. Then there's the ego factor. If he assumed you'd always be there, he expects you to wait. But when you don't, when you move on, focus on yourself, or simply stop making him the center of your emotions, his ego receives a shock. The idea that he might no longer have access to you triggers a powerful instinct to re-establish his place. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's fear, regret, or genuine concern wrapped in pride. Another reason for his return is comparison. During the time apart, he meets other people, friends, dates, co-workers, and subconsciously measures them against you. He notices who lacks your emotional depth, your empathy, your communication style, your energy. When he sees qualities in you that others don't match, your value becomes clearer. What he once overlooked becomes something he feels drawn back to. But perhaps the most profound reason men return is this. Space reveals truth. When the noise fades and distractions settle, he realizes what mattered and what didn't. He sees what he lost, what he misses, and what he wasn't ready to appreciate. Men don't return because you chased. They return because your absence forced them to see your worth. And sometimes that realization is powerful enough to pull them right back to the connection they once walked away from. When a man returns after pulling away, especially after ignoring you, the most important thing to understand is this. You hold the power now, not because you're trying to control him, but because you've grown, healed, and recentered your energy. How you respond in this moment will determine whether the dynamic becomes healthy or repeats the same cycle that hurt you before. The first step in handling his return is to remain calm and grounded. Don't rush to respond. Don't flood him with emotion. Don't give him the validation he's subconsciously seeking by proving you've been waiting. Your calmness sets the tone. It shows you're no longer operating from a place of fear, longing, or uncertainty. You're operating from clarity. When he reaches out, whether it's a simple hey, a long apology, or a sudden attempt to reconnect, observe how he returns, not just that he returns, His tone, his consistency, and his intention matter far more than the timing. Many men come back out of curiosity, loneliness, or ego. But the one who's truly ready will come back with accountability, not excuses. The next crucial step is to maintain your boundaries, not soften them. Boundaries aren't walls, they're standards. And the moment he senses you still have your standards intact, he'll treat you with more respect. You don't need to lecture him, interrogate him, or demand explanations. Instead, let your behavior communicate what you expect. Respond with warmth if you want, but not overinvestment. Interest, not intensity. If you choose to engage, guide the conversation toward clarity, not nostalgia. Nostalgia makes you forget the pain. Clarity makes you prevent it. Ask yourself silently, is he showing growth? Is he showing consistency? Is he rebuilding trust, not just chemistry? You don't need to ask him these questions directly. Your pace will reveal the answers naturally. Take things slowly. Let him show through actions, not words, that he's different now. You should also avoid falling into the trap of over-explaining your absence or justifying your growth. You don't owe him a story about how you healed. Your evolution is self-made, and he can witness it without needing a detailed explanation. When a man sees that you didn't pause your life during his absence, it inspires deeper respect than any speech ever could. Another powerful part of handling his return is staying attuned to your own emotional reactions. Does talking to him feel peaceful or draining? Does his presence feel grounding or distracting? Does he bring clarity or confusion? Your body will tell you the truth long before your heart or mind do. Listen to it. Finally, remember this. Allowing a man back into your life doesn't mean slipping back into old patterns. It means inviting him into a new version of the connection, one built on your current strength, not your past vulnerability. Handle his return with poise, patience, and self-respect. If he's truly meant to be back in your life, he'll rise to meet the woman you've become, not the woman he left behind. Becoming the woman he pursues isn't about learning tactics, pretending to be someone you're not, or playing emotional chess. It's about stepping fully into the version of yourself that naturally attracts effort, respect, and consistency. When a man senses that you value yourself, not just in words, but in the way you move through the world, his entire approach shifts. He stops taking you for granted and starts treating you like someone worth pursuing. The journey begins with ownership of your emotional space. When you no longer rely on a man's attention to feel worthy, you radiate a quiet confidence that draws him in. You're not chasing validation, you're not seeking reassurance, and you're not waiting to be chosen. Instead, you're choosing yourself, your peace, your priorities, your growth. That energy is magnetic. Next, you embody consistency with your standards. Not rigid rules, not ultimatums, just steady alignment with what you know you deserve. You don't entertain mixed signals, you don't excuse disappearing acts, and you don't cling to potential. Your boundaries become the filter that protects your heart. And men sense that. A woman who honors her standards communicates without words. If you want a place in my life, bring respect and effort. Another shift comes when you cultivate a full life outside of him. Your passions, goals, friendships, and routines create a sense of richness that makes your presence feel valuable, not because you're unavailable, but because you're fulfilled. Men are naturally drawn to women who live from abundance, not attachment. Your life becomes a world he wants to be part of, not one he feels responsible for filling. You also become the woman he pursues by embracing emotional balance. You feel deeply, but you don't lose yourself in your feelings. You love wholeheartedly, but you don't abandon your self-worth. You can be soft without being fragile, open without being dependent. That balance makes you grounded, something men find rare and irresistible. And finally, you embody selectiveness. Not everyone gets access to you. Not every man gets your time, your energy, or your heart. When he realizes you choose partners based on alignment, not loneliness or longing, he understands that winning your attention is meaningful. Becoming the woman he pursues isn't about him at all. It's about becoming so aligned with your own value that he can't help but rise to meet you or lose his chance trying. As we wrap up, remember this. The power in any relationship is never about forcing someone to notice you. It's about cultivating your own presence, your own confidence, and your own life. When a man ignores you, it doesn't diminish your worth. It simply reveals where he stands. Your response to that moment, however, defines your future, both in love and in life. True empowerment comes from choosing yourself first. When you invest in your passions, your goals, and your personal growth, you become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you're fully alive and aligned with your own energy. That energy doesn't go unnoticed. Men are drawn to women who are complete in themselves, who are not dependent on their attention for validation, and who carry a quiet, undeniable confidence. Another key takeaway is the value of patience and discernment. Not every man who pulls away or returns is worthy of your time. Use the lessons of absence to evaluate his intentions, his consistency, and his respect for you. Emotional independence allows you to see clearly, choose wisely, and prevent repeating cycles that don't serve your growth. Finally, remember that self-worth is your anchor. It isn't defined by his actions, his timing, or his attention. When you embrace your value, the right people gravitate toward you naturally, and the wrong people reveal themselves without draining your energy. So stand tall, honor your boundaries, and live a life that reflects your power. When you do, not only will you attract the right energy, but you'll also step into a version of yourself that no one can ignore, a woman who is unshakable, magnetic, and unapologetically herself. Your story is yours to write, and the most important chapter starts with you.